Hi again, this is Gil Robles, and I'm back with another video. Now, this video is going to be a little bit different, or a lot different. It's going to be longer. I didn't intend for the videos on this channel to be too long, but I'm going to go ahead and do this because I want to talk about some things, and I'm going to start out with this painting, of course, in real time. And it's a bit of a challenge for me because I have to provide the audio for this or the lecture for this, and of course this is also different in the sense that I am even though the video is in real time, I'm doing the audio over the video. I didn't do it at the same time, and if you see the painting, you would know that the reason why there's just a lot for me to focus and to concentrate on while I'm doing this. And the idea behind doing this, I got actually from another YouTuber named Marco Bucci. I hope I'm pronouncing his last name right. I will leave a link to his page. But he did this painting, this series of paintings on a character, Batman. And what he did on one of them was to uh, start out very chaotically, and from there work at his painting to make sense out of this chaos. And I like that idea a lot. I like that idea so much that I started playing around. This is not the first painting I did with that idea in mind, bringing order from chaos. So I did this because, well, first of all, before I go into that, let me also say that I'm using Photoshop. I'm only using one brush here. I'm not really concentrating on any 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 number of brushes. I'm just using one brush, and I'm just changing the size of the brush. I'm changing the transparency of the brush, and I'm changing the transparency of the layer, and that's all I'm doing. There's no other fancy brushes or anything else right there. Those are the only things that I'm doing in regards to this painting. Okay, so I like the idea, going back to talking about liking the idea of doing bringing order from chaos, because it brings me back to the basics and to the importance of drawing, the importance of getting the basic stuff. And by drawing, I'm talking about anatomy. I'm painting a portrait, so I'm more into the construction of the head in this painting. But a drawing, bringing order from chaos, means that you have to rely on the knowledge that you have of drawing, of the basics of drawing, perspective, composition, and anything that you might want to add. Uh, and as I go on, I'll continue to explain. And it also, I want to also talk about that software is just a tool. And if you don't have the basics of drawing, if you don't have an understanding of what the basics are, then the tool is not going to help you. It can only take you to a certain degree, and your work will always look amateurish. And it won't take you beyond that. You need to be able to know how to draw. Uh, One of the things that I've learned from watching other YouTubers who have professional careers and stuff like that, who use it in other different ways. I've basically been an illustrator, illustrating for a children's magazine, and that's been the bulk of my illustration work. I've done other things, but basically it's been doing these illustrations for children's magazines. Guys who, like the guy I mentioned earlier, Marco Bucci, he talked about how he wanted to animate for Pixar, but what had happened was that he really relied on the software to get him places, and he learned quickly that what, the knowledge of drawing and painting was what he really needed. Well, I don't know how quickly he learned. He was young in age when he described it. Watch his videos; they're great. but as he described it, he was younger. So, but knowing the software, you could use any software. You could use Photoshop. You could use Sketchbook Pro. You could use ArtRage. You could use, and the software is there's a number of software. Just like in media, in traditional media, there are a number of choices. You can do oil paintings. You can do watercolors. You can do pastels. You can draw in charcoal. You can draw in pen and ink. You can draw, but the rules remain the same. The rules remain the same in that you need to know how to draw. You need to know the basics of how to draw. You don't need to rely on your tools. Now, you need the best tools that you can possibly get, and you need to be comfortable with the tools that you have. But you just need to find what works for you. For a long time, the thing that worked for me the most was Sketchbook, and Photoshop was a lot older, but I was always I came to digital art from a traditional art background. So when it came to Photoshop, it was just too techy for me. There was so much to learn about it, and I was a little bit intimidated and put off by it. When I found Sketchbook Pro, it was a lot easier to use, especially in the beginning stages of the software. When I had discovered it watching another YouTuber many years ago, and I wanted to learn that particular software. It was inexpensive, and I thought it was neat, and it got better since then. And since then, my knowledge of digital art had grown so that I'm less intimidated by the software, and I can get into it and understand it better. But this particular painting is not using anything too complicated or too techy. It's just more straightforward than that. But again, you need to know software is just a tool. You need to know the basics. There are tricks in using traditional tools. I can name a few off the bat. I don't know. Well, there's the artist James Gurney. When I am very much into learning new things, so I'll buy videos or whatever, and he has a number of great videos. And not on digital art; they're on the traditional medium. But one of the techniques he uses in traditional medium in oil painting is that he would put a kind of paste and develop a texture so that it looks like he's putting very thick paint on his canvas, but it really isn't. It's really that the paint glazed over or put over this texture, and it makes it look like big juicy brushstrokes. And that's one trick for there's all sorts of methods of drawing, and there's also the famous illustrators JC and Frank Leyendecker. Now, what they did was, Norman Rockwell talked about this in his book My Adventures as an Illustrator, and he met the Leyendeckers, and what he wanted to find out for them is the secret of their medium, because I recommend looking at J.C. Leyendecker's artwork and looking at his brushstrokes, and the way he laid down his brushstrokes were it was the way Rockwell talked about it is one of the secrets of getting those big juicy brushstrokes was the medium that he used. And so him and his brother developed this medium that they used, that they kept it a secret and not told anybody, and that was one way in which he was enabled to do these juicy brushstrokes. And at least that's the story told by Norman Rockwell in that book My Adventures as an Illustrator, when he met the Leyendeckers. I believe the chapter is called Mount Tom Road or something like that, but it's been a long time since I read that. But it's in the book. So there are a number of ways of there are a number of tricks and tips that you can find in in traditional media as well as there are in digital media. So many people hunt for these tips and tricks. However, you still need to rely on your knowledge of the basics and not on those tips and tricks that you've learned using computer software, or even in using traditional media. You still don't need to rely on those tricks as far as getting your work done. You need to actually be able to rely on, like I said, on those basics, on your knowledge of those basics. And this is why I like this idea of bringing order from chaos, about starting the painting chaotically, because it forces you to go back. It forces you to rely on those basics. It forces you to try and bring about this order from this chaotic mess that you've made. Now, there's a book called The Art Spirit. It was written by the students of this artist named Robert Henry. And the students, what they did was they collected their notes on a series of lectures that the artist gave to them. I believe he taught at the Art Students League. And that book has been in publication since that time. It was first published, and somewhere in early 1900s, I believe. And it's a great book. I'll leave a link to the book. It's a great book to get. And one of the lectures that he gave, or one of the things that he talked about, was that art. One of the how would I put it? One of the functions of art is to bring about balance, to bring about order, to create order from chaos. And so, again, it goes with this, with the thinking. It forces you back to relying on those basics to find your way out of this chaotic place, And so, what are those basics? What are those things that you need to know in order to be able to bring about this order? And of course, there's your ability to draw, your ability to you're knowing your proportions, knowing where, just knowing where to place things, knowing there's so much about drawing, your value structure, and knowing how to start the drawing by mapping out where you're headed, to starting from the big places to and getting down to the particulars, so that you start with a strong foundation. And by the big things, I'm talking about, like the large masses. Not that, if you notice, while I'm painting, I didn't go right ahead and paint the eye. I didn't go right ahead and paint the nose. I was building up towards where I was going to put these things, or where I was going to reveal these things in the painting. I basically put down a general idea of where things were going to be placed, and I kept things, and they're still, at this point, at this stage of the painting, things are still really, really general, and I'm trying to keep it that way. And I think of two things: one, getting your drawing right, and two, getting the value structure right, getting your values right. Value is more important than color. Color is secondary when it comes to value. Color is like the third thing I would think about. First, I would think about the drawing, then I would think about the value. But drawing and value are very much same category, very much the same thing. And then then I would think about my color choices. I would think about things like warm and cool, and because the values would take care of how dark or light the color is, and values I try to keep down to your dark, your middle, and your light. And by light I don't mean highlight. By dark I don't mean the darkest dark, but I mean the general masses. There's Sargent painted this way, and he talked about it in his own lectures. The painter John Singer Sargent would talk about painting a head like you would paint an apple, where you would put down the middle value, the what people would call the local color, and then you would put down the dark value, and then you would put down the light. And by that way you would model the form. And then there's the transitions between the values and so forth, but basically that's what those three things, or with those three values, are what you need: your dark, your middle tone first, your dark, and your light. And studying artists who knew their craft, like Sargent, like any of the other people that I've mentioned before, is a good way of understanding things. I would recommend also the drawings of a artist by the name of Giambattista Tiepolo, and he's a Venetian painter. I think he's Venetian. He's Rococo. He comes from the Rococo era in painting, and that was in a period following the Baroque painters. And if you look at his drawings were basically the pen stroke was his darkest line, his darkest areas. Then he came in with a wash, and then the white of the paper was. So those were his three values in the drawing, and they were very simple, but they were everything that you needed to communicate to you his drawing, or his intentions in that drawing. And they're beautiful, they're straightforward, and they're very, very simple. And that's one of the things that I try to do is in bringing this order to this chaos, or in any painting or drawing that I do, is I really, really try to simplify. I have a tendency to want to render, and I don't want to render everything. I'm not one to go for every pore and such like that. That has never been my interest. I don't know if I can do it, but I don't enjoy paintings like that. I admire the skill. I admire the effort that the artist put in doing all of that, but I find it hard to enjoy the painting because it brings it too much to being like a photograph and less like a painting, where you can use photo reference. I do. I've drawn and painted from life. I use photo reference. I'm using photo reference now, but I'm not trying to make it look like the photograph. I'm not trying to draw every single pore and so forth. I'm trying to translate in what looks like a painting to me, and part of the way of doing that is simplifying it to the basics. It's like taking the information that you see, whether you see it on a photo, you see it in life, and transferring that onto your canvas, breaking it down in your mind as far as what's important, and transferring that onto your canvas. That saves you from being a slave to the photo, or being a slave to every single detail that you see. You need to, we don't take in every single detail, even when we look at things from life. A photo kind of gives you every single detail. A photo doesn't discriminate. Our brains and our eyes do discriminate, and they do rely on the information that's most important and tells us exactly what we're looking at without getting bogged down into every little detail. So I'm trying to translate the experience that I have in seeing, and part of that is to decide what to emphasize and what to subordinate, to simplify it, and this comes from years of being in a classroom, and this is what I've been told, and learning how to see. This is how I've been taught in learning how to see, and that, one, we don't take in everything at once. We take in what our brains take in is the information we need. We don't see everything at once. And artists from the Baroque period have been pointing that out. There was a time where artists painted, and they tried to detail everything, add detail to everything that they see. And there was a time where artists realized that they don't see everything, that some things are in focus and other things are out of your peripheral vision, and they don't have to be in focus to make order, to make sense or order of what it is that you're trying to relay. So I'm very much in that spirit. I mean, and this is of course subjective. It's what's important to you. There are artists like the Pre-Raphaelites who determined that everything needs to be given the same importance, and photorealists are in that vein, in that the detail is very, very important, and so they try to render everything photorealistically. I don't see things photorealistically. I don't imagine things photorealistically. I don't, I'm trying to communicate what I see and how I feel about what I see. And the mystery and the hardest thing to do is the what you feel about what you see. And I don't know how to communicate that, other than there's a story that my art teacher, I went to the High School of Art and Design, and I had an art teacher there named Mr. Greenberg, and we called him Greenie. And one of the things that he had said, or one of the things that he had relayed to us, was that the idea of what he wants people to see when they look at his paintings. He wants them to get the feeling that if they can relate to his paintings. When they look at a man walking, if he paints a man walking across the street in the rain and he's hunched over and covering up because he doesn't have an umbrella, he wants that to spark a memory in people so that they know exactly what it feels like. So that way he's communicating something in his painting. And he's communicating a feeling that they both share. N.C. Wyeth, the illustrator and father of Andrew Wyeth, he talked about that when he painted, he was aching and tired because he tried to imagine himself in the same pose of the whatever character that he was painting. So if the character was like plowing, and he was familiar with plowing, having worked on a farm, and he would imagine himself doing that as he painted, so that hoping that would translate into his painting, and somehow the people who are viewing it would get an idea of the physical work that goes into the subject that he's painting. So the physical work in that the subject, the person in his painting is doing. But that's what it means to relay a feeling. So these are the things, and when I started out this painting and it was chaotic and I was just throwing colors down and trying to get textures and so forth, and starting out with a bunch of brushstrokes, it seemed to be going in a lot of different directions, but there was a purpose and order to it, even though it didn't seem like it. But I mean, the first initial strokes was just to get color down, and then everything else was to try to make sense out of it. So there was the purpose, and where I slowed down in order to make sense out of it. And doing this brings me back to those basics, brings me back to all the things that I've learned before in order to rescue this picture. So it forces you to rely on those things, which is a good thing. Which is this is and it forces you also to abandon those tips and those tricks that you've accumulated over the years that I've accumulated. I could have gone this approach in any of different ways, but this helps me to rely on the fundamentals. This helps me to go back to the beginning. This helps me to think about what's important and what carries a painting. And it's kind of like teaching myself. It's kind of like, okay, I don't have art instructors peering over my shoulders telling me things like, okay, make it bigger, make it smaller, make it darker, make it lighter, or things like that. That was a joke that we said in a painting class often. But it forces me to teach myself to bring back those lessons and to go over them in my mind as I'm trying to solve the problem. Now, also, this is the second attempt at this particular painting that I'm doing. The first attempt did not go well. It was an awful painting. And I deleted it, got rid of it after hours of working on it. But I didn't forget it, because what it was give me lessons of what not to do, give me lessons of what I need to correct, help me to understand why it failed. Again, Robert Henry, in that book, The Art Spirit, one of the students recollected something that he had said, and what he said was, look, don't throw out your bad paintings, at least, or your bad drawings, at least not until you've studied them well enough to know why they are bad. And so, you do these drawings, and everything has value. Even your worst drawings have value, because you have to understand why you did that and what you need to correct, what you don't know and what you've learned, why it doesn't work. And so you can apply that to your painting. Now, a lot of this is going back into this and applying the things that I realized did not work the first time. And one of the things is the drawing was off. The drawing was badly off. And so I needed to work on that. One of the ways the drawing was off was that the eyes were too far apart. I needed to bring them closer together. And another way the drawing was off was that the eyes were not aligned properly. They were not on the same axis. This is a problem I often have, and a weakness that I have. So I looked at it and I said, you know what? And I wasn't crazy about the values. I wasn't crazy about the values and the color choices and so forth. So I said, let me try this again, which is what I did here. And now, with all of this, with the bringing order from chaos, I'm not advocating for a better approach. This is a great approach. This is a great approach to drawing for all the reasons that I've mentioned before. But it's also a great approach to just getting back on track. I did the last painting, which was awful. I took the knowledge of why that painting was awful, and I added this to this idea of bringing order from chaos, so that I know right away from the beginning that I'm set to correct things, so that I'm set to make revisions in this from the very beginning, from the outset. And I'm forced to fix the painting, fix the drawing, fix the painting. And that was what I found interesting about this approach. Why I wanted to try this, and it's what I've learned from trying this approach. That it forces me to go back. It forces me to rely on those things, which I know are the basics of making a good painting or good drawing. So, which is what I was doing. Now, like I said, I've done this many times where I've messed up the first time, And regardless of what medium I'm using, the second pass is usually a lot better. Now, I've done drawings where I've messed up more than one time. That too is a good thing, because you know what? That means that I am presented with a challenge, and I should, instead of avoiding this challenge, I should go through it and find out, why am I not able to communicate this? Why am I not able to produce a painting that I feel satisfied with? And so I you know, if I've messed it up 3 or 4 times, I still feel the need to go back and try and do a better painting or a better drawing. There's a time, I guess, when I throw up my hands, but more often than not, I'll come back to it at some point and try and do something with the painting, or try and redo it and see it in another way. So, you know, the second pass is usually better. Sometimes it takes more than that. It happens to me many times. And one of the things that it reveals, and that's my alarm going out telling me it's 5 o'clock in the morning. So, but one of the things it reveals is what my weaknesses are. And which is a good thing. It's a good thing to know your weaknesses. I'm aware of my weaknesses every time that I paint. And, you know, I want to put as much distance with those things every time that I paint. I want to put more distance from my weaknesses. So I'm very aware of them, and I don't take them for granted. And I don't run from them either. I try to get past it. I try to be aware. I'm aware of it when I paint, so that I'm aware of the challenge in my painting from the outset. That I want to be able to take those weaknesses and run to them, because what it is a clear path of a way of getting better at my art. If there's a way you want to get better at your art, it's by looking at the things which you know are a challenge for you, looking at the things which you know that have been difficult in the past, things that you've done, and then face those challenges and try to overcome them. My weaknesses, like I said before, are basically drawing weaknesses. But then, you know, there are other things. They're like this thing of bringing order out of chaos helps in that, you know what, instead of trying to draw very tightly and then trying to be loose, I start very loosely and then become tighter and tighter as I go on. And now that's helpful for me in a lot of ways, because I don't lose the spontaneity in the painting. It remains, and to some degree or the other, I don't get bogged down too much in the details, because I'm trying to simplify and think of the things that work and not the details. And because I can get lost in the details, and the details come later, and then I have to be able to select what details are important instead of trying to put down every little thing that I see. So knowing my weaknesses and attacking them in the painting helps me to become a better painter. And so it's important, like if you know what your weaknesses are, don't be afraid to admit them. Don't be afraid to look at them. Don't be afraid to and don't be discouraged by them, because instead be happy when they come up, because you know what it is you need to work on in order to get better. And so, and then with this also, you know what, there's an attitude where everyone feels like they need to be original. and they don't need to copy from someone, or they don't need to look at someone's art to get an idea of where they're going to go. And you know what, imitation, the people do. I see one of the good things now is people do a lot of master studies, and it's not a new thing. The painter Peter Paul Rubens went to the Sistine Chapels and made copies of the Michelangelo. He made drawings of the Michelangelo's paintings. He made drawings of certain of the figures. He made a copy of a Leonardo painting, which has since been lost, and the only way we know it is from the copy by Peter Paul Rubens. Now, there were other copies of this particular painting. I think it's called the Battle of Angari or something like that. I don't know how to pronounce that word. But Rubens did a copy of it, and it is the best known surviving copy, Rubens being a master himself. And but he did it to learn from Leonardo, from what he did. And that's the same reason people do master copies right now. It's not a new idea. It's an old one. Before we had the reproduction of paintings and books that we have had for so long and that we take for granted, people didn't have that in the Renaissance, so they made master copies, and they kept the portfolio of their master copies to refer to it, to help them to understand better how to become better artists and draw, learning from someone else. So master copies are a good way to learn. And master copies were not just done by students, they were done by people who were masters in their craft as well. And so it's a good idea, it's a good practice to continue to do and to make drawings and paintings of, not necessarily to hang on walls or anything like that, but to be able to learn from someone else. So it's a good idea to make the master copies. It's a good idea because it's a good idea for a number of reasons, not only to learn from someone else, but also to understand how painters solve problems that can help you with your weaknesses. If like my weaknesses is drawing and working out the axis of the face and so forth. Like I said, I had problems in the first painting with the eyes. So I look at the things that other painters do or other artists do, especially the classical artists. There's a book by Juliet Aristides that she talks about, classical drawing, and she put out 2 books like that, and all the ways of developing your drawing. And I don't follow that book to the letter, but I open it and I look and I learn. Every time I look at that book, I learn by the lessons that she provides, by the way she explained things, by the drawings that are used as examples. And it always brings you back, like this exercise does, to basic things, very, very basic things in developing your drawing. So the basics are very important. And man, this is the longest I've gone on talking in a video, and I'm thirsty, but I'm gonna hold off on that. My mouth is pretty dry, but you don't need to know that, right? So another way, again, is doing the master copies and so forth, but making time to paint. Painting is not something you do every now and then. If you want to be an artist, it's something that you do every single day. Painting and drawing is something that you do every single day. I have a habit. I work a 9 to 5. I work a 9 to 5 that has nothing to do with art. And in the meantime, every now and then I get illustration jobs. Now I have to work that 9 to 5 in order to pay my rent and take care of my family and so forth. But it's not the dream job. It's not what I want to do. It's not, it doesn't satisfy me the way art does, but it's something that I have to do in order to provide. And with that, you know, I use the time that I have on the job. There's my time and there's the time I have to work. And you know what? What I do is basically I draw on my time. I get 2 15-minute breaks and 1 hour break. And during that time, I'm the only person in the room that I work in. I lock that door and I sit down and I draw. And I come up with sketches, and I've posted them on my Facebook page and my Instagram, and and they're basically my afternoon sketches. The sketches I do in the afternoon. Sometimes they're from memory, sometimes they're from a photo, but it's basically a way of keeping on going, of making use of my time when I don't have so much time. I have, life is complicated. I have to work, I have a family life, and etc. So I need to budget my time so that I make the most out of it. And part of it is like when I do these videos, like I said before, when that alarm went off, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. So I started this video out a lot earlier than that. So in order to get here. So, I budget my time. I make sure I use my time wisely. I make sure I'm not too tired. I make sure that I'm able to do everything I'm supposed to do. But I use the time so that I can best, so that I can get back to my work, which is what I love to do. The more you draw, the better you get. And that's my idea of drawing. Ingres told, painter Ingres, French painter, told Degas, draw lines, continue to draw lines from life, from imagination, draw lines so that you can get better at your art. Michelangelo told one of his assistants, don't waste time and draw. Don't waste time, just continue to draw. And those are the things that I remember. I had a great teacher, like I said, in art design. We called him Greenie. And one of the things he said is, look, learn from everyone. Be humble. Learn from everyone. Look at the things that people are doing. You can learn from a student. You can learn from a master. You can learn from a novice. You can learn from... I like drawing and painting realistically. I can learn from a cartoonist who's not drawing and painting realistically. They all have something to share, and whether it's the act of drawing itself or whether it's their discipline, there's a lot of things to imitate in people who perfect their craft. And that's one of the things that I do and continue to do. Hokusai, Japanese artist, use the word manga, but back when he was doing manga, it was much different from what you see as manga today. Manga usually, from what I see, refers to a cartoony comic book type style, which is not what Hokusai did. But he basically drew every chance he got. He named himself, he had a number of names. He named himself Hokusai, something about old man mad about painting, or mad about drawing. And that really talked about his commitment, his passion for drawing and for painting and for communicating the things that he sees. And it was said that on his deathbed, he talked about, or even before that, he talked about, when up until the age of 70, nothing that he did meant anything. He considered it all garbage. Then he went on in the different ages of what he expects to accomplish and how good he was going to be, way past his 100th year. And in his deathbed, it was said that he said, look, 5 more years and I would have been a great painter. 10 more years. He wanted more years to paint. And that is the attitude and the passion that I want to have when it comes to art. I want to be able to have that attitude, to be able to think the way he did about art. And but on the practicals, some days we really want to paint. Some days we don't want to. Some days we're hot for this. We're driven. We're passionate. We want to perfect our craft. We want to get better. And some days we're just not that into it. Many distractions can come in the way. Uh, we can be discouraged about where we're at as artists. Many things can happen to take our fire away from us. Um, but in those times, discipline is what needs to take over. Having the discipline, like I said, that I do my paintings in the afternoon and on the breaks, not my paintings, my drawings, my sketches. And in that, I'm doing those things to keep my hand moving. I'm doing those things because I know there's going to come a time where either I'm going to have more time to paint, and I want to be ready for that time. So I want to keep my hands moving. And that doesn't mean that what I do is always trivial when I do these sketches, but it does mean that from the start, I have a mindset that, you know what, I'm going to have more time and I need to be prepared for that time so that I can be at my best to do the work that I want to do, that I feel passionate about, that I feel inspired to do. So I want to be at my best. So that means that I have to draw every day in order to do this. So that is why I do that. And I work past the times where I don't feel like drawing. Again, there's going to be a time where I'm going to want to draw, where I'm going to have 7 different ideas and not enough time in the day to get through all those ideas. But in between those times, I continue to do my sketching. I continue to do my drawing. I continue to work at what's needed. And so this has been a long way. This painting's almost done. And again, it was about bringing order out of chaos. And I've just about gotten there and almost finished. Now with this, you'll see I've gotten into the bad habit of doing these paintings for demonstration purposes. And as a demonstration, this has done its job right here. But afterwards, when I looked at the paintings, there were a lot of minor things that needed to be touched up about it. So I continued to work on it after this video was done. So you might see some slight changes when I finally get to the end of this video and show the finished painting, and you might not, but because they're very subtle. But listen, I hope this video was informative. I hope it worked for you. Please leave comments. I like looking at the comments. I like getting feedback, and I want to know, is this video too long? Am I ranting too much? You can leave a comment. Let me know what it is you think about it. Do you want more videos like this? Do you want less videos like this? Do you want some idea that you want me to focus on? Some questions you want me to answer that I can include in my videos? Please let me know, and I will definitely include them. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.